It's lovely to see you all here this afternoon, and no pressure. So if we talk about emotions, and I think fight or flight response, I've got my my chimp brain, my ancient brain with me. I like to speak publicly, but when I start I feel a little bit nervous, so I thought I'd just make you aware of that to start with. So my name's Susan Smithhurst. I'm a mother to somebody with a neurodiverse condition. I'm a specialist mental health emotion coach, and I'm a postgraduate researcher. And my daughter-in-law did this lovely graphic illustration of me, but it was just minus the crow's feet. Right, so the aims of this afternoon's talk is to explore emotion as part of our lived experience, to look at how emotions can impact on our mental health and well-being, to explore the role of emotional education, regulation, how we process emotions, how we accept the difficult emotions that sometimes come up for us, and how we have compassion for others and ourselves when we, what they call emotionally dysregulate. And particularly look at how we make this visible and what this means for us, but also for people with neurodiverse conditions. Okay, so why am I interested in neurodiversity? Well, what experience have I got? I have been a mum for many years. I've trained as a specialist mental health coach. I've got over 20 years experience in academia, coaching and counselling. I've got 2 years experience of working with young people who have neurodiverse conditions with On Track. And I've done for many, many years postgraduate emancipatory research, which means research in action for empowerment of people. So what are emotions? Emotions and feelings are two different but connected phenomena. Emotions originate as sensations in the body, so like getting hot, getting sweaty, getting sticky palms, and in the body, and feelings are influenced by emotions but are generated from our mental thoughts. In a very real sense, we have two minds, one that thinks and one that feels. So we do feel our emotions in our bodies. Right, so what's emotional regulation? Emotional regulation is a term that's used to describe a person's ability to effectively manage and respond to an emotional experience. So that's about how we soothe our emotions. If things get a little bit overwhelming or a little bit too much for us, how we regulate those emotions and stay calm in that situation. So we'll move on to the strategies to help emotions in a minute. I think that's a little bit behind. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Connor to read a poem about what it's like for somebody with a neurodiverse condition living in a neurotypical world, because it doesn't always work for people who have neurodiverse conditions to work within neurotypical structures. So Connor, would you like to come and...
I am disguised inside these masks, a face within a face, staring out through square eyes. Reflections of days lost to a memory sensory overload, perception. Create to please people's projections, overload on information. Plant like seeds, acting up just to fit, moulding one's thoughts. Where to begin? Back to this question I have already been asked. What is your name? What is your task? So it continues like this for days, months, years. It comes seeping from the horizon, the big freeze. Sat frozen, fearing, loathing, despairing, detached from a world full of rules. Follow the laws, neurotypical obstacles in full form. tripped, flipped, switched to conform.
So we can see that it can be very difficult for people who have neurodiverse conditions to live in a neurotypical world. And when we think about working with those people, we think about like how we manage and how we're compassionate to ourselves in terms of our emotions, because it's not a case of them and us, it's a case that we all have emotions. Emotions bring colour and texture to our lives, and they're something that come every day, all the time, and they can come up in volumes. So sometimes we can feel very happy, but at the same time we can feel frustrated. We can feel angry, but we can also feel a bit excited. So we could feel, I'm very excited today to be talking, but also a little bit scared of talking to an audience. So sometimes what we can do is we can get overwhelmed, we can get confused, and then what happens is we think, oh, and particularly in my case, can I do that talk today? Oh, do I need to ring in sick? Oh, if I ring in sick, what will happen? And what would happen for me if I didn't come and talk to you today? I would deny myself the opportunity of meeting all you lovely people. I would deny the opportunity of being able to speak and share information about emotions. And I would also feel deeply ashamed that I'd let everybody down. Imagine that for somebody who struggles with emotions anyway, because I can put a name to that. I can say that to you. This is how I can process. But what about people that find it difficult to process emotions? And do they not need our support to be able to do that? So it's not a them and us. It's about us, and it's about us delivering the right service to people and making sure that we've got enough self-compassion to be able to do that adequately. So as part of my research in doing this talk, I spoke to a person who worked in a prison. And he was saying he hadn't really thought about neurodiversity and emotions before. But what he explained to me was an example of himself leaving home, being very stressed, having had a bit of a disagreement with his family, getting into his car, getting into a huge traffic jam and getting stuck, getting to his job, his place of work, and then no parking space. Can you imagine how his emotions would have been running for him? Then going into work late and then having to get up onto a landing to open a door to somebody that had ADHD and had been locked behind a cell door for many hours and completely dysregulated. So you've got a dysregulated person delivering a service and less empathetic than they might have been, and then somebody who would really want to get out of that situation. So it's really important that when we do this work, we don't just look at how we support the emotions of those that we work with. We also need to look at us, because every single person has emotion. Okay. So we're going to do some strategies in a moment, but I've got some bits of tools that I will share with you. But the strategies to manage emotions for all of us, regardless of who we are, is to identify and reduce our triggers. What is it that's making us stressed? What is it that's making us anxious? What is it that's making us fearful, angry? If we identify it, then it certainly is a help in the way that we manage it. Also, attune to the physical symptoms. So what is it? What is it physically? Are we hungry? Is that making us feel a little bit angry? Are we cold? Are we tired? Are we dehydrated? What are we? What are our physical symptoms? If we've got this kind of, what's this going on? Why am I feeling so hot? So attune to your physical symptoms. Think about the story that you're telling yourself. So is it so catastrophizing? You know, you're stuck in traffic. What could you do about that? You can't. So take a step back. I was going to have a hula hoop, wasn't I, here? So it was like, step into the hula hoop. This is my dysregulated emotions. Step out of it. And as you step out, your emotions change anyway, because you've broken that loop. So engage in positive self-talk. You know, why am I feeling like this? Oh, well done, you did a wonderful job. So engage in the positive self-talk, think about how you might respond to a situation. Think about how when we get to work, you know, if we are dysregulated, what could we do? How are we going to respond to the people around us? Are we going to fire off at our line manager because we're late? Or is our line manager going to fire off at us because we're late? Look for positive emotions, and we can engage with therapy. So what's emotional dysregulation? It's an emotional response that's poorly regulated. That's just a quote. So what it means is things get the better of us, things overwhelm us, and things make us feel stressed and very uncomfortable. That can come up in all sorts of ways. So if we're talking about neurodiversity and we're talking about meltdowns, people having a meltdown, people, you know, really getting upset, what do we do as neurotypical people? Do we stand by and think, oh my goodness, that child's having a tantrum? Oh my goodness, what is that? We need to understand that everybody's different and everybody's emotions are played out differently. So we need to be understanding. We need to bring that word in, empathy and compassion. So the signs, so things that can tell us that people maybe have got some dysregulation and include, and can be driven by, so it can be driven by anxiety, it can be driven by shame, it can be driven by intense anger, it's driven by sometimes memories that are either, you know, the situation is either there or it's a perceived situation or a perceived rejection. So it can lead to self-harm, suicide intent. Sometimes it's played out in risky sexual behaviour. Perfectionism, severe depression, difficult interpersonal relationships, skills deficits, substance misuse, impulsivity, and sometimes eating disorders. That's not an exhaustive list. There are many other things that I could add on to there. So one of the things that I've done, and particularly in the 20 years that I've been doing academic research, is to ensure that I don't drone on about all this theoretical stuff, is that I give a voice to the people who experience this on a day-to-day basis. So we do this through art, we do it through drama, we do it through poetry, and we do it from people talking. I'm considered neurotypical. I don't know if I am, but I don't want to be the voice of the lived experience of someone who has ADHD, autism. So I am really blessed today in that for the representative voice of people who have neurodiverse conditions is I have got Connor, who eloquently read you that poem, and I've got Steve. So I'd like to invite Steve to come up and give me right. So yesterday we did it in a question and answer, didn't we? So in terms of like things that have happened in your life and things that have triggered you to dysregulate, would you like to tell me a little bit about how that's happened?
Well, ever since I was a child, really, being kicked out of school and being like relationship breakdown with my family and being put into care and hostels, being kicked out of hostels and things like that, to eventually prison, and just lots of trouble in my life.
Yeah. And when we talked yesterday, you spoke a bit about how that stigma stays with you, so that if anything happens now, you kind of get the same.
Yeah, once you've got like that label, then they just, like police, council, any authority figures just don't really believe you, and they just think that you're a troublemaker, and it's like nothing to do with an ADHD or anything like that. So
there's a real lack of understanding out there about what ADHD and neurodiversity is.
Yeah.
And so and talking the wider picture around other people, what do you think the signs of dysregulation? If you saw somebody having a meltdown, how might you describe that?
It could seem very crazy and like the person may be dangerous or just a seriously angry, violent person, when they could just be having a bit of a meltdown at that moment.
And so would you say to this audience today is that we do need a better understanding of
100%,
neurodiversity and the emotions that can go alongside that?
Yeah, definitely.
And that we need to learn by listening to the voice of people who have got neurodiverse conditions. And I hate labels, and it's not a them and us, because we're all people. We're all people. But just for the purpose of this talk, I've taught neurodiverse conditions and neurotypical, just simply because that's the only way that I can make sure that we make visible what's not visible and how we start to work with that and how we accept ourselves as people and how we accept difference. Because people are all different, aren't they, Steve? Yeah? And I think Steve is amazing for coming and talking to us. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's the lived experience. That's just a taste. This whole talk is only a taster. I have so much stuff that I could share with you today, but I've only got half an hour. And when I think I sent the slides over to Amanda, she just put, Sue, you only have half an hour to talk. So I thought it was important that I just cut to the quick. But if anybody does want any information or anything like that, you're perfectly welcome to get in touch with me and I will send stuff out to people. So in terms of the consequences of dysregulation, what we're finding is that if people are not supported adequately or not understood adequately, we can look at things like poor educational attainment. So people are not getting the grades that they need in schools. You know, the thing is that we're all about, aren't we, qualifications and things like that, because they lead us into jobs and careers that we want to do. But people not understanding neurodiversity can certainly, in that way, we're not supporting the people. And so what happens is they start off with low educational attainment. If they're in jobs, they get lack of promotion or stagnant career choices. They have limited opportunities to take work. So they're probably working in jobs that they would far sooner be flying doing academic degrees and things like that, but because of their impulsivity or distractibility, they're not able to do that. So lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. So they want to stand up here and talk like me, but they just don't have that confidence. And having to do that can create a meltdown. It can create dysregulation. So they can have a lack of focus, but how do we help them to focus? How do we help people? Or people that hyper-focus and are perfectionists, how do we help them to say, that's okay, that's good enough, that's good enough? So it can lead to people doing antisocial behaviour. It then can go into a trajectory of criminal activity. It can end up with people going to prison and it can end up with suicide. That's definitely not what we want. We don't want that for anybody. So how do we work with people's emotional states to be able to ensure that doesn't happen to people? So what's emotional intelligence? So I studied emotional intelligence for over a year. It was about, emotional intelligence was about how it helped me to emotionally regulate. So I went to this mill, stuck out in the middle of Derbyshire, which was just brilliant. It was part of a study at Derby University, but we did real life building emotional resilience. So we all sat in a circle and we all spilled everything out. Well, we thought it was going to be so easy to do that, but of course it wasn't so easy to do that. And then at the end of the day, they said, oh, now you can all sleep in a dormitory. It's like, oh, what? Can't sleep in a dormitory? So I ended up in a caravan in the middle of a wood. I'm quite scared. I sleep with the light on at night on the top of the landing, and I ended up in this caravan, pitch black, and it's like, you will be all right, Susan. You will be all right. And there was people walking, and it's like, oh, where these people go through the woods? I'd never been so terrified in my entire life. But I did it, and I stuck it for a year. And if I had to stay in a caravan now, I think I'd be all right. So emotional intelligence, from a theoretical perspective, is the ability to perceive, evaluate, express and control our emotions. So I think this is something that, I mean, it took me all my life to go and do this thing in the mill, and what happened there? But I think emotional intelligence in schools, emotional education as part of nurture groups, things like these are tools that I think that we could all use to help people and to help children and to help teachers. I think that's, for me, that is something that I would love to see right across the age range. So let's start teaching this stuff. What's emotions? They're colourful. We all have them. What's emotional literacy? Let's find out what it is. Let's see if we can't get this kind of course into schools, into prisons, into the health service, wherever. My other thoughts around emotions are, what is it like for people who have neurodiverse conditions, so ADHD, and you might be a health visitor, you might be a social worker, you might be a professor in a university, but what happens to you? Do you have to mask all the time? Do you have to go to work and then come home and go to bed extremely early at night because you've just had enough? What is it like for people? We're all people. So, right. So, if we do learn all this, I like this. I am not afraid of storms. I was thinking about this big thunderstorm when I was in this caravan stuck in the middle of this wood. And I just loved this. I just came across this book. I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning to sail my ship. So we're all captains of our own ships and masters of our own destiny. So, and my son sent me the most beautiful poem recited by Pessoa, and I really love this. So I'm going to play this for you.
How many souls I have. I've changed at every moment. I always feel like a stranger. I've never seen or found myself. From being so much, I have only soul. A man who has soul has no calm. A man who sees is just what he sees. A man who feels is not who he is. Attentive to what I am and see, I become them and stop being I. Each of my dreams and each desire belongs to whoever had it, not me. I am my own landscape. I watch myself journey, various, mobile, and alone. Here, where I am, I can't feel myself. That's why I read, as a stranger, my being, as if it were pages, not knowing what will come, and forgetting what has passed. I note in the margin of my reading what I thought I felt. Rereading, I wonder, was that me? God knows, because He wrote it.
So I think it's time to make visible what's been invisible around emotions. I think it's time, this is only a taster, remember, but I think it's time to start talking. And I think it's time to really start talking about what we do, how we support ourselves and how we support others. And Connor's got another small poem around talking and listening.
Then, when the other had gone, each man about his business, Robin turned once more to the youth. "Now, lad," he said, "tell us your troubles, and speak freely. A flow of words doth ever ease the heart of sorrows. It is like opening the waste weir when mill is overfull. Come, sit thou here near me, and speak at your ease."
Right. And in conclusion, I just want to read something from Dr. Matt Gibson, who's at the Birmingham University Centre for Emotional Education. He said, "If we see emotions as a way of understanding our relationship with ourselves and others, and then how we feel becomes uncertain and even chaotic, that is saying that we don't really know who we are. We have many souls, we have many emotions. We don't know who we are or who you are in relation to me in those interactions. So who are you to me? Who am I to you? But who am I to me in terms of the many souls? So if we're uncertain about our emotions, dysregulated, and if we, as a result, don't know who we are or the other person is to us, then we really can't do what's best for us, develop relationships, enjoy life in the same way that people who are able to know what they feel can. So if we're talking neurodiversity and people are struggling with their emotions, how do they know how to have a happy life? Do they know how to succeed? But we're all human beings. So I would never separate one group of people against another, those who have emotional dysregulation and those who don't, because we all experience emotional dysregulation under certain conditions. It is just for some that those conditions are more expansive, and so they experience it more. For example, and we call rejection sensitivity disorder, which is when people can perceive that they're being rejected, even if we feel that they're not, or criticised or judged. It's very difficult for people. So Matt says, key to this, and I think part of the answer, is in developing the skills of the person to deal with the conditions, whilst also managing the external demands placed on them that cause the breakdowns in feelings. So one of the things, I did a lot of research around this, and there are some things that you can have a look at. But I think one of the things is identifying emotions. This is a really good book. It's a children's book. There's so much in here around what are emotions, how can we identify emotions. So sitting down with a child or sitting down with an adult and saying, do you know what those feelings are that's coming up for you? Yeah. So there are all these kind of tools and things like that out there. And yeah, of course you can. I'll leave it out and then people can come and take a photograph of the covers if they want to have a look at that. The other thing that's really good is our emotions are also triggered by, as I said before, if we're thirsty, hungry, cold, tired. This is an exceptional journal that I use, which is around my goals, positive thoughts, what sleep I've had, what meals I've had, what I want to do, my water consumption for the day, my exercise I've taken, reflections, has it been a good day? How do I feel today? So there's a talking point. So this is a tool that you could use with anybody. Today I'm grateful for, because gratitude helps us to level up our emotions. Notes, and you can doodle. If you want to draw, you can doodle. So there are tools that you can use out there that would help you to start this conversation with people and also to get a measure of how people are feeling. So there are so many things that you can do around emotion, and I wished I had all afternoon to talk to you, but I'm sorry that I don't. Okay, so thank you. I'm dead on time, Amanda. So are there any questions? Would anybody? Oh, yeah. So if anybody didn't want their questions heard, please just get in contact with me after the event and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Yes.
I just wondered if you could give any advice on how you would support someone who was dysregulated and you were trying to help them in that moment. What sort of things you could do?
Well, for me, it's just sitting quietly alongside someone. So it's about being empathetic. It's about not pushing for answers. It's about how are you feeling. Sometimes these kind of journal questions are quite good. So what is it? And then helping them to identify what's happened, the situation, and the emotions that sit with that. So it's kind of a process, but initially it's just sitting quietly alongside someone until they've calmed down. A lot of people now use mindfulness, getting people into a mindful and an attuned state. So attune your mind and your body, and some people like quiet music. It depends on the situation, depends where you are. Okay.
If you have a child that's really dysregulated and getting quite physical with you and kind of like smashing things around, and what would you suggest? Because in the moment I found that kind of saying consequences don't really work, like, all right, you can't have your laptop, and I've learnt the hard way that doesn't work. But do you suggest anything for that moment when everything is kind of...
It's all in a mess. So it is around, for me, it's around keeping things as calm as possible in ourselves, because that's when we need self-compassion, so that we don't get dysregulated, because we can get dysregulated and then the thing inflames. And I think that from what I've learned, the quieter that we become and the calmer that we become, the child's not getting that level of involvement. So the child starts to quieten down and it's just not talking. I've found that a lot, and particularly with the young people that I worked with that did have emotional meltdowns, it was just being really quiet. Yeah. And I've always said, if somebody's, and particularly for adults, because we work with children, young people and adults, if somebody's raging at you, the quieter that you speak. They have to come down because they can't hear your response. Okay, so I hope that helps. Anybody else? No? Well, I'm about if anybody wants to have a chat, and I've got some cards if people want to get in contact with me. But I think that the stars of today are Steve and Connor for coming and being brave enough to do this talk with me.